Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. If you've watched The Scuttlebutt for several seasons, you may remember a guest from a couple seasons ago, Krista Anderson. She is a Gold Star wife, but was also a spouse ambassador for AER, the Army Emergency Relief. Well, today's guest is Sean Ryan, who is the Director of Communications with the Army Emergency Relief, and he is also a retired colonel from the Army. We talk about Sean's long history of service, why he decided to join, his family history of serving, and why he works for AER now. Not only that, we get a lot more into the Army Emergency Relief, a really incredible nonprofit. It's the only nonprofit for the Army. It was founded in 1942 by Secretary of War Henry Stimson and Army Chief of Staff General George Marshall. AER is charged with relieving undue financial stress on members of the force. They provide zero interest loans, grants, and educational scholarships to servicemen and women, their family, and we get into a bit of how you can go about doing that if you are a current service member, what you need to look into, and why AER is so important for servicemen and women to know about. I hope you enjoy this episode with Sean Ryan. He has some extensive history in service, and I think you'll enjoy hearing about all the things that he was up to while he served and how he went from a private first class all the way up to colonel. I know I was very interested in it, so I hope you enjoy. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know when we release new episodes. And if you have any questions or are interested in contacting Ryan, please connect with me, Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Enjoy the show. Joining us today is Sean Ryan. Sean, super excited for you to join the Scuttlebutt today and talk about Army Emergency Relief. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Sean. And yeah, I've been with Army Emergency Relief going on a year now, after nearly 30 years in the Army. So I spent 4 years enlisted, came in during Desert Storm, and like most soldiers, never planned on staying more than 4 years. Almost everyone says that. I've never met anyone that says, yes, I plan on making this as a career, within the first couple of months of being in the service. So I ended up doing my last 25 as an officer, and mainly as a public affairs officer. And I had amazing jobs. The Army was amazing with me, and no regrets there. I love serving my country. Had 5 deployments, went on all over the world, spent 6 years in Europe. It was a great experience for me. The education they provided as well. The opportunities are endless in the Army if you seek them out, and they really pay off in the end. So I'm very happy to have retired. No regrets there whatsoever. And I'm very excited about being with Army Emergency Relief. It's the official nonprofit of the U.S. Army. So I basically just took off a uniform and slid right into this new position.
Slid into a polo.
After 2 weeks or so being retired, although I did have a couple of months of vacation afterwards, so I was ready to get back to work because I'm used to moving around a lot. But yeah, so it's a great organization. And as a young private first class in the early 90s, when I joined, I was still in college. I joined during Desert Storm, as I mentioned, and I actually had to use Army Emergency Relief. My mother-in-law got ill, and I had to fly from Germany back to Colorado. And I did not have that $1,000 flight payment to make. And so they gave me an interest-free loan, and I flew back, and then I just paid them back afterwards, and it worked out great. So it's great to be part of this organization.
Awesome. There's a lot that I want to kind of dive into about your story before we get to AER. So first, you enlisted during Desert Storm. Now, why did you enlist?
Desert Storm was going on. I was almost complete with college, and I grew up in a military family, a third generation. I just felt compelled to go do my part, as a lot of people say. It didn't quite work out that way. I will be completely honest with you. I went to basic training and then some additional training after that, and I flew to Germany. I was literally a private first class. I did not have my degree. If you had your degree, you would have come in what they call a specialist in E4, but I didn't have it quite yet. I was a couple of classes short still when I left. and flew to Germany. They told me basically, "Hey, Ryan, don't unpack." I said, "Okay." Wait around for a few weeks, working and things like that. But as it turned out, they said, "No, your unit is coming back, so you're not going." So I was like,
Mm,
"Okay, well, that plan didn't exactly work how I thought it would."
yeah.
But I was already over in Germany, and I worked over there, had a great unit, and it just continued from that. I did decide if I was going to make the Army a career at that point, I was going to finish my degree, and I did that within the first 4 months of being overseas. I was able to finish a couple classes
Did they
and
upgrade you
get
to
my
specialist
degree.
then?
Um, no, it doesn't work that way.
Okay.
And so basically, yeah, actually, I went from private first class to when I retired, I was a colonel in '06, and probably making specialist was the most difficult rank that I had to do. And the reason behind it was all these folks were coming back from Desert Storm,
Okay.
and I was the new guy. And
Mhm.
so a lot of privates and private first classes, they only had so many openings to be a specialist, and I wasn't it. I had to wait in line and wait my turn, and of course I asked, and they're like, "Hey, Ryan, you have to make an impact here first."
Mhm.
And so I started doing that, and eventually did make specialist and sergeant, and then I went on to officer candidate school.
Very nice. So who in your family served?
My grandfather served, and then my dad retired from the Army after about 24 years out of Fort Carson, Colorado.
What did he think whenever you beat his 24-year mark?
Not only did I beat his 24-year mark, but he retired a lieutenant colonel, and I retired a colonel. So that was a little, elbow jabbing within my own family that, hey, you at least have to stay in long enough to beat dad. And of course, it doesn't work that way. That's not how long you stay in. It's the promotions happen based off, what you did, and again, openings and just timing. And there's a lot of things that go into it. But it was very satisfying. He actually did. My wife pinned me and my kids pinned me, but he was also there um, to do opening statements. And he served in Vietnam too. Matter of fact,
Mhm.
he didn't even see me until I was 9 months old. Um,
Wow.
so he told that story, which as a son listening to your dad telling a story that you haven't really heard, it was pretty
Mhm.
interesting because some things you just didn't hear and you didn't know. So he gave a great opening speech, and it was very nice to have him there to help celebrate that day.
As a civilian myself, I am kind of always interested in this. Does that is there anything you said it was sort of like an elbow ribbing there within the family, but once you outranked him, did he ever feel like, well, dang, I can't tell you what to do anymore? Or could you pull rank and be like, you're doing the dishes tonight?
Now, I did tell him a couple of times. I'm like, "Look, Lieutenant Colonel, this is how it's going down." Uh, but no, he did give me a very nice salute when I pinned on
Mm,
the bird and the colonel, and so that was very nice. It was a good moment. But yeah, we actually don't talk a lot of military. Now that he's getting older and he's made his scrapbooks and stuff, he shows me all this stuff, and you know much like a lot of folks probably, I find out more and more about him as time goes on,
mhm,
because he wasn't quite the World War II generation where they didn't speak at all. But
right.
the Vietnam generation, they came back to a different era. And it wasn't like when I would come back from deployments, I would have um, people lined up and,
Yeah.
cheering and saluting and shaking your hand and wishing you well. Unfortunately, that didn't happen with a lot of the Vietnam vets, and
Mhm.
so it's been a while for him to open up. But he had a great career as well as I see.
And was your grandfather Army as well?
He wasn't. He was actually merchant marine, so as a different time
Oh,
frame. Yeah, my
wow.
family originally is from Plymouth, Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and then matter of fact, we ended up in Colorado Springs because my dad was stationed at Fort Carson, and
Hmm.
then we just stayed. I stayed the rest of the time, and I grew up in Colorado Springs as well.
Hmm.
And now that I'm finished with my military career, I'm back in Colorado Springs because it's home. But yeah, he did the Merchant Marines off the water of the Plymouth shores, and so it's a good Ryan legacy. He just spent a couple years, but
And they were just,
combined.
sorry
Go
to
ahead.
interrupt, they were just awarded or commended for their World War II service. Is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
So we have, just the last three generations, we have about 60 years combined.
Wow.
So I think that's pretty good.
That's very good. And I'm sure he was happy that your dad was happy that you didn't go Marines or, any of the other
Yeah, no,
branches.
I stayed Army. I stayed Army.
That's great. So take me a bit through your service before we get to AER.
Okay.
Desert Storm. You're in Germany. You decide after 4 years you're gonna stay on.
Yeah.
How did the obviously 9/11? That's sort of my generation coming up through. Things shifted a bit. You started to get into some deployments. How did your career progress?
Okay. Yeah. It progressed slowly at first. Getting into officer candidate school was difficult. And again, going back to I was the new guy, and
Yeah.
you need recommendations. And hey, I'd like to go to officer candidate school, and they're like, yeah, we don't really know you, Ryan, so you have to make your way in. And so I used to ask, hey, what do I have to do? Number one, to make rank, and two, to get these recommendations. And basically they're like, hey, you have to do really well in physical, and PT. And actually, I was a runner in college, and so I was able to take my PT test and score very high. And then I started going to soldier boards, and then I ended up being the United States Army Europe Soldier of the Year. And
Oh,
then I had my degree, and so I started, accumulating all these things that they told me I needed to get recommendations and to get promoted. And then after that, it started happening really quick, and
mhm.
I ended up making. A matter of fact, I was supposed to go to Soldier of the Army board, and but I had an opportunity to go to a primary leadership development course. And once you pass that course, you'll pin on sergeant, which was very important to me because it was very important coming from a private first class and then making specialist and then making sergeant. I wanted to attend officer candidate school already as a buck sergeant, as they call it, with some experience, and then go. So I bypassed the board, and I went to school, and I did pin on E5 before going to Fort Benning Officer Candidate School. And then once I left Officer Candidate School, uh, I went to school at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And then my first assignment was Fort Riley, Kansas.
Okay.
And yeah, under the 1st Infantry Division. And I really enjoyed Kansas. Maybe it was because I grew up in Colorado, and it was more of a, mid states type place, but I
Hmm.
really enjoyed it. I enjoyed Manhattan, Kansas, and Junction City, Kansas, and the surrounding areas. I could drive to Kansas City in about less than an hour and a half. So I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the
Hmm.
culture. And then after that, I got orders for Germany,
Yeah.
and so I became a commander in Germany, a company commander in Germany. And yeah, the story, matter of fact, the day that I left company command, usually it's a great day because you've done 2 years as a company commander. You were in charge of soldiers, which is the highest honor you can have in the military. And I had an outstanding first sergeant. We were really close. We still are today, and it was a great experience. Because of the time difference, I did my ceremony in the morning, and I had orders to go to a different part of Germany, which was Heidelberg, Germany. And I drove there. I literally moved into my new residence, turned on the TV, and big sigh of relief. Hey, my command is over. Well executed. Had a great time. The first plane hit the Twin Towers, and my life and everyone else's forever changed after that.
Yeah.
It was a very tenuous situation because, first of all, I felt like there was nothing I could do because I was in Germany, and this
Hmm.
just happened in New York City. And I just had one of the great mornings in my career, and then to come home and that happened was
Yeah.
very devastating.
Mhm.
We didn't know what to do, how to support it from Germany. So that was a big deal as well. And obviously, it was tragic on many levels, but the feeling of helplessness definitely rose in me. And it was a great day to one of the worst days in the history of the U.S. So that will forever hold true in my mind. Uh, but we got through that. I will say this: the German people were very supportive.
Hmm.
They laid flowers at the gate because, of course, everything was locked down because we didn't know exactly what was happening. So we went into stealth mode,
Right.
right away. But they're very supportive. And then I spent probably another 9 months in Germany, and then I came back to the United States, to the East Coast, right outside Washington D.C. So yeah, career press or progress from there, and then I soon pinned on major. I was a captain at the time of 9/11. I
Mhm.
pinned on major, and then I made a big career choice. I decided to go into the public affairs field,
Mm.
and so I did that. I went to school at Fort Meade, Maryland, and my first assignment was Fort Carson, Colorado, which I thought, hey, you can go back home. What can go wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um, so up to that point, I had not really deployed, and I had a boss. Because matter of fact, when I was a commander, I was supposed to go to Bosnia,
Mhm.
but I'd already spent my 2 years as a commander, and they said no, the big boss wants you working for them. And I was like, I'd really like to stay because those are my soldiers. And they're like, no, you're going to work for the big boss in
Yeah.
Heidelberg, and that's just how it is. So I missed out on that. But my boss did tell me, hey, if you stay in the army long enough, that
You'll go somewhere.
everyone will give blood sooner or later in a good way, not in a bad way, but
Yeah.
you'll go. And sure enough, I came back home. I bought a house, and literally 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Baghdad, Iraq.
Yeah.
And before I knew it, I was part of the surge.
Hmm.
15-month deployment. I was in eastern Baghdad, so I was right in the thick of things.
Yeah.
It was a very difficult deployment. A lot of we weren't sure if we were coming or going for the first 3-4 months
Hmm.
before General Petraeus decided you're staying longer, and not only that, we're plussing up uh, the soldier base with thousands more,
Hmm.
and so that's kind of what happened there. It was a difficult period. I lost 65 guys in my own unit
Wow.
during that 14. It ended up being 14 months. I was with the second infantry combat team,
Hmm.
and it was the time when IEDs were really the big destructive force that
Yeah.
we were dealing with, and we were learning every day, how to deal with that. But I learned a lot. I learned my trade, public
Hmm.
affairs, and I worked under. I worked under a very young Vincent Brooks, who was a 1 star at the time, that went on to be a 4 star. General Odierno was a 3 star at the time.
Hmm.
General Petraeus led the war. I couldn't have learned from a better group of
Yeah.
military leaders to this day. So I was indoctrinated very quick and very fast, but that was my new public affairs career.
Right.
I would leave there later and I would go to grad school. The Army was nice enough to send me to fully funded grad school,
Yeah.
which I did not turn down. And and that was a great experience, kind of getting away from the war and kind of. I was never injured. I probably went on missions 3 to 5 times a week. I
Hmm.
was very fortunate to not be injured. But I will say this: coming back, it was difficult because even when you're driving, I'm looking at potholes differently than how you look at potholes.
Well,
I'm looking,
Pittsburgh has some big potholes, but I hear
yeah,
you on that.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
looking at curbs painted yellow. That's one of the things I used to do is take out a section of the concrete of a curb, and they would put it back, lace it with some explosives, and put it back styrofoam, and then paint it yellow. So I learned loud bangs. I had to deal with that for the first couple of months. So there was definitely inside a healing that I think every soldier, whether they want to admit it or not, has to deal with. And I will say this: the American people were fabulous. We would
Good.
get boxes from them with magazines and shaving cream, and I can tell you this: early in the early days, we didn't have like a store or anything. There, whatever you brought is what you used. So it sounds simple to if you hear this, but people would send razors and shaving cream and deodorant, and it was well needed and loved. I mean, we those are great days when we got mail. You
Yeah.
just can't underestimate receiving mail, and it sometimes is from a perfect stranger. I didn't know who it
Yeah.
was, and we'd get letters from kids and drawings. I used to put those up on my wall, and things like that. So.
Yeah.
I really do thank the American people. There is a big disconnect, I think, between the American people and the military. I think only less than 7% have served in the military, so sometimes it's tough to understand what we're going through. But they know
Hmm.
that we're there to protect the interests of the United States. But I can tell you, I was always fully supported by the American
Mhm.
people, and I can't say enough about that because it really made my deployments go by faster, knowing that we had that support.
That's
Um,
great.
so after that, I'll fast forward a little bit. I went to go teach at the public affairs school for a couple of years, and then I got picked up to do a fellowship in public affairs or at Google in Mountain View,
Wow.
California. So that was a big deal. I went
Yeah.
to at the time Google. Not that it's not today, but Google was just named, best company in the world to work for I think the third consecutive year.
Hmm.
So to be a part of their program and to see how their corporate relations worked with other companies and people was very eye opening and something that I could bring those skills back to the Army to help them. And so my next assignment was the public affairs officer for the 1st Infantry Division. So I went back to Fort Riley, Kansas, which of course I loved because I liked it. I liked it the first time I was there as a lieutenant, and you go back to the same type of environment. And I worked for General Paul Funk, who's now the trade out commander, 4-star. He was a 2-star at the time, and also for Sergeant Major Grinston, who is now the Sergeant Major of the Army. So, I mean, again, going back to, I had tremendous leaders
Yeah.
to show me the right way and how things are supposed to be done. And so it just kind of, things snowball from there, and
Hmm.
you hang out with good people and good things happen.
Right.
And then we got deployed. So we were part of what they called CJTF. It was Combined Joint Task Force in
Hmm.
Baghdad. So I went back to Baghdad and was the public affairs officer there as well. I came back from that deployment and I had orders, believe it or not, once again for Fort Carson, Colorado. And I went to go work for the 10th Special Forces Group and at Fort Carson for a couple of years. And
Hmm.
then my 3rd year there, I went to lead the World Class Athlete Program,
Hmm.
which gets Army athletes ready for the Olympics. So I was
Yeah.
one of the coaches and I ran the PR efforts there, which was a
Hmm.
big deal because we had the 2018 Winter Olympics. And then, of
Hmm.
course, you have a lot of international competitions. And from a PR standpoint, that's what that program is all set up for, is to highlight that we have soldiers that can compete at the highest levels. And matter of fact, in 2016, Paul Chalimo won the silver medal in the 5,000. So
Hmm.
that was a big deal for the program, and it kind of jump started them to
Yeah.
in other events. Um, yeah, so from there, I got a call again from General Funk, and he was the 3rd Corps commander out of Fort Hood, and he said, "Hey, Sean, you're coming with me." And
Yeah.
even though I wasn't part of them, I went back to Baghdad, Iraq,
Hmm.
uh, as the spokesman for the war in Iraq and Syria, working
Wow.
for General Funk.
Hmm.
And when he calls, you go.
Yeah.
And we had that conversation in his office when he was a 2-star and I was a lieutenant colonel, that, hey, if I get deployed, we're going to work this thing. And so I went over back to Iraq again. But it was great because I went back, and some of the same people, to include the Iraqi generals and some of the folks I worked with at the Baghdad embassy, were still there.
Oh, great.
So I had a little bit of a different job, but there was still some familiarity with the whole situation.
Hmm.
And one thing about when I went in 2014 was ISIS had just become a stronghold and they had just taken over. So I witnessed that firsthand.
Wow.
And then I can tell you, on the day I left as the spokesman, we took the last bit of land that ISIS held.
Hmm.
And then I literally flew out that night.
Wow.
So it was very rewarding, because how often do you see, the beginning of a fight and then you actually see the end of a fight?
Right.
So that was very rewarding for me as an Army officer, and as the spokesman, it was great.
Yeah.
And then I came back to Colorado Springs, and I started the public affairs office for Space Command. And so,
Whoa.
yeah, so it was just down the street at Peterson Air Force Base, and it
Yep.
was a big deal because it was brand new.
Hmm.
We had the ceremony at the White House in the Rose Garden. So, I
Hmm.
mean, literally, there I am, just some kid from Colorado, that came in at PFC. I'm sitting behind, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and
Hmm.
it's the president, the vice president, my boss, and the Secretary of Defense up there, talking about Space Command,
Hmm.
and I'm right there. and I was walking around the White House in full uniform and had full access. It was a great
It's
moment.
one of those things where you're just like, it's very surreal. It's just
Yeah,
like, yeah, like where you've gotten to or where you're at, you're like, I'm standing here right now. How did this happen?
yeah, and I'm taking photos of like the Washington Monument from the White House grounds.
Yeah.
So it was pretty surreal. And it doesn't matter who you back or what your beliefs are. When you're in the Rose Garden at the White House, it's a great feeling, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
this is why we're such a strong country,
Mm-hmm.
because all the history and the strength that we have. And so it was a great moment for me in my career.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was going to do one more assignment. I wasn't sure exactly, but I decided, they were talking about maybe sending me to the Pentagon, and I was already in Colorado Springs, and this
Mm-hmm.
is where I wanted to retire. And
Right.
so that's when I decided, it's time to go. And I put in my retirement paperwork, and then I retired, and then I started working for Army Emergency Relief.
I have a question because this season of the podcast we had on the TAP program.
Okay, yeah,
And I was wondering, did you use the TAP program when you transitioned out?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yep. Pretty much everyone has to. And it
Mm-hmm.
was, yeah, it's a great program. And I mean, I thought it went very well. I mean, it's a lot of, I think when you're a retiree, it's a little bit different because you've gone through a lot of things. There's a lot of folks that use it that, maybe just spent 3-4 years, 5 years in the service. So it's a little bit different for them. Um, but yeah, I had a great experience with them, and it was very easy to transition out.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, and we had on, I believe, the director of that program earlier on in the season. So for our audience, if you haven't watched that episode, go back and watch it. Come back for this sort of semi-sequel. Sean, this is got an incredible career, and now you're on the Scuttlebutt. So I mean, where do you go from here?
I can only go down from here is what I'm thinking.
Thank you for filling us in on that, because I'm sure there's a lot that we could dive into with any piece of that, being public affairs, having that sort of access, understanding how to communicate what's going on. There's so many things we could dive into, but let's get into AER, what we actually came
Yep.
for. But thank you for the history of just your incredible, amazing career. But let's dive into AER, and if you give me a bit of information, maybe some history on what
Sure.
AER is, why it's there, and what the programs are on offer.
Sure. So this is also a very historic year for us. Army Emergency Relief is it's our 80th birthday.
Oh,
So
happy birthday!
we started in 1942. Chief of Staff of the Army. And it's for soldiers helping soldiers. So,
Mm-hmm.
1942, they had a lot of events. They had Irving Berlin, This Is the Army. Then they had a movie with, young Ronald Reagan, a Lieutenant Ronald Reagan, and some other actors. And of course, all the funds they would have would go to support the military, the Army. So it was great. And we just kind of continued the tradition. And it started off, small, soldiers helping soldiers, but now it's morphed into over 30 different categories. AER offers zero interest loans, it offers grants, and it offers scholarships to both military spouses and their children. So, and when I say scholarships, I'm talking like for military children, almost 3,000 scholarships we
Wow.
awarded.
Yeah.
And both of them combined right around $12 million. So it's not some rinky-dink operation. These are major funds,
Mm-hmm.
and it's all due to the generous donations of soldiers, retirees, some outside great Americans, and then some corporations as well.
Yeah,
So,
I read that. Sorry to interrupt. I read that
no.
AER has provided $2 billion to nearly 4 million soldiers.
Yep.
And since 9/11 alone, it's provided $1 billion.
Yes.
And
yes.
that's very interesting, because you don't realize how many soldiers may need this.
Yep. I mean, and we try to stay at what we call the tip of the spear. Like we just put out a program. If you're in Eastern Kentucky and you're affected by the floods, please call us. With the baby formula shortage, we couldn't pay for the formula itself because that's something that the TRICARE that covers military has to pay for, but we will cover like your shipping costs. So there's programs like, were they part of the 30 plus categories? Absolutely not. But we'll almost make up a category to support you in whatever your needs are. So there's things like medical. We'll pay for families' cranial helmets if their kids need them, and maybe it's not covered by, whatever medical insurance you have. Army Emergency Relief will step in and pay for that type of thing.
I always find it interesting, and this is for our audience. Our previous guest a couple seasons back, Krista Anderson, talked a bit about AER, and I think I had a question in during that podcast, which I'd like to ask for you, Sean, as well. Is that
Sure.
VBC, where I worked, the nonprofit, you don't really usually correlate a nonprofit with the Army. So how did that become to be, this relationship between AER and the Army? I believe it was it was instituted, created, but why does it serve as a nonprofit?
Well, back in 1942, there was a lot of soldiers that needed help.
Mhm.
And so they actually put it in the regulations. So to this day, we're part of the regulation. Matter of fact, our board members are active duty Army leaders, to include the Vice Chief of Staff, the Chief of Staff, the Sergeant Major of the Army.
Mhm.
So we have yearly kickoffs. And what we do is we go and try to receive donations to cover some of these costs. But that's how it started, was in 1942, when soldiers just needed help. I mean, these back then, it was just men, but nowadays, of course, we have, it's a melting pot of our society that are in the military. So it's definitely morphed from 1942, and if they need help with just about anything, they can receive it. So it started off as being an internal, because back then you didn't have all these other nonprofits that, now you have Wounded Warriors, and you have all these other nonprofit, probably 500 plus nonprofits that cover different things for different individuals. For AER, we cover active duty soldiers and retirees and their families. So we don't cover maybe the person that served 5 years in the Army and then got out, because there's other organizations that do cover those type of things. So we do stick to the active duty and
You try not
retirees.
to like step on each other's toes on who
Right,
can help.
right. And we will help out, anyone that's been medically, discharged for any reason as well. So there's a lot of stipulations, but we also realize that, yeah, we don't want to have fratricide with the other organizations that are there to fill those missions itself. But that's kind of the background of it.
Now, how does someone go about getting funding or getting a no interest loan?
Okay, so there's over 70 offices around the world. So at most installations, there'll be what we call an AERO, and it's an Army Emergency Relief Officer. So there's offices around, and there's also, if you go to our website, you can click on sites within 50 miles of you. So maybe you are in Eastern Pennsylvania and there's no Army base that's really that close. It'll tell you, like, okay, who you need to go through. You can also call headquarters, Army Emergency Relief in Arlington, Virginia, and they can take care of you also. One thing I did want to note too is, of course, we are called Army Emergency Relief, but we work with all the other services aid societies. So if you're Navy, you can come in and talk to an Army Emergency Relief officer, and they will hook you up with the Navy, with our equivalent at the Navy. So it doesn't matter what service you're in, we all work together, and we will get those situations handled for you.
Now, scholarships are a little different than financial assistance. So,
right.
Like with financial assistance, within that sort of realm, are there different programs? Is there different assistance types and levels within just financial assistance?
Yes, there's the Mrs. Patty Shinsheki Scholarship, and that's for Army spouses. And then there's also a General James Ursano Scholarship for Army children. We call them children, but of course, if you're college age, I don't think they like to be called children, but basically that's how you're classified. As long as, and there's stipulations as well, and all of our things are need-based. So that's a key word that we use, is it has to be needs-based to receive it. But like I said, we give out over $12 million in scholarships, and we've done this continuously for quite a few years now. So it just depends on what category that you're looking into. But one of the things that AER does is, if you say you get in a car wreck and maybe it's, you don't use your insurance, or somehow there's some issues with the insurance, we will give you like either a grant or a interest-free loan to help you get that car fixed. Maybe it wasn't an accident, and it has nothing to do with insurance. Maybe your engine broke, and you're a 22-year-old PFC, just like I was, and you don't have $2,000 to fix your car because you
Mhm.
don't make that much money. You can go in and they'll set up a program for you, either a loan or a grant, and then interest free, and you'll just pay, whatever, $110 a month until it's paid off type thing.
Yeah.
But we'll help you get that fixed. So, like I said, there's over 30 categories, and it really encompasses a lot of things. And it just depends on the situation. Everyone's situation is different, and that's kind of how we approach everything. Is everyone's different. It's not cookie cutter. It's not, hey, you have to, your car has to have this certain engine, to brake, or it has nothing to do with that. We'll
Yeah.
take each case on an individual basis and try to help out the best we can.
Yeah, we're not going to help you for your 91 Corsica, but
Yeah.
So how, and I was going to ask that, because how is needs based assessed? Like, do they take a look at your financial snapshot?
Yes.
Does it matter what rank you are? Things like that.
It doesn't necessarily matter what rank you are, but there is we track every single transaction, so we know who the main focus is,
Hmm.
that come into AER. And one thing about government pay is there's no secret. You
Hmm.
can go online and see exactly how much they make, and we already know all that. So we do have financial, not AER, but there's financial counselors within the morale, welfare, and recreation departments of the Army. They can actually sit down with each soldier and break down their financials and say, hey, this is where you're getting into some trouble. And so to answer the question, it's like needs based means, okay, we're going to take a snapshot of your financials.
Yeah.
If you're driving a 2021, brand new Mustang, okay, that's a life choice. Uh, and so, we handle that a little bit different than, like I said, hey, my 1999 Camry broke down and I need help. Of course, if you're an E4 or something like that, we're more than happy to help. And it's a very quick process now. One thing that we have done is we streamlined everything. And so there's two ways to do it. I mentioned you can go see your ARROW, your Army Emergency Relief Officer, but you can also go through your chain of command. Um, in the chain of command, we have what we call the Quick Assist Program, and that's when the first sergeant and commanders can authorize anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 automatically to get you situated. So they will eventually go through AER, but it can be handled at the lowest level, and that's what we're trying to do, is handle everything at the lowest level.
That's great. Now, as for like people that are going through financial difficulties, does AER only offer like loans, or does they offer financial assistance as well? Somebody, a counselor that could sit with you and sort of work with you on, I believe Krista called it the life binder, trying to make
Yeah.
sure that you're following a much better procedure of working with your finances and what you need to do to like be
Right.
successful.
So every installation or every post usually has a financial counselor or advisor that a soldier can sit down with and go through all their expenses, what they have coming in, what they have going out, and come up with a plan.
Mhm.
That information, if the soldier authorizes, can be shared with AER. We don't ask for that necessarily. That's what the chain of command will do as well, is
Mhm.
because if you're my soldier, I know you better than anyone. So I can call up AER as a commander or first sergeant and say, hey, Sean needs a loan. I've gone through his financials. I have them, but we need to get this authorized because he needs help right away. Like
Sure.
maybe you had a death in the family or an illness or something, and you have to get back now. You don't have time to waste on, hey, my grandmother's ill.
Yeah.
I don't have 72 hours for everyone to figure out, this process. It's a quick streaming process,
Yeah.
and we'll get you that money to get that plane ride home so you can take care of what you need to do with your family.
This does sound like a bit like the Army decided, like we need our soldiers where we need our soldiers, and if they're
Right.
dealing with something financial for whatever reason, let's get this taken care of and buttoned up quick so that we can get them back to where we need them.
Right. So mission readiness is our number one priority
Yeah.
in the Army for sure. And you know, times have changed, and today's no different. So we know that every soldier has to be mentally and financially ready in order that for them to be deployable and ready to complete their actual mission at hand. So that's one of the reasons that AR exists too, is to get you on board and make that something that maybe you have the weight of your shoulder, the world on your shoulders, and as something that we can help out and assist with and get that taken off your plate so you can actually worry about, what you're doing overseas somewhere and some place that a lot of people may have never heard of. We don't want that soldier thinking, how am I going to pay my bills? How is my family going to get through the rest of the month? They can come to Army Emergency Relief and we can help that out. And so going back to what you said, it is very internal. It started off as an internal program and it remains internal today. And the reason is this: if you go to any military installation and you drive outside the gates, you're going to see payday loans. You're going to say, come to us for a loan. And the issue is, look, we're in America. Those places are not illegal by any stretch. However, Army Emergency Relief is offering 0 interest loans. These specific institutions are offering 30 to 40%.
40, yeah.
And if you don't pay within 2 weeks, then the interest keeps compounding. So we don't want that to happen. Again, we want, and it's not that we want to know everything about a soldier, because everyone has their limits, and we're not trying to get into people's personal lives. But one thing, the stigma that we're trying to get across is, if you need help, ask for help. It's not a weakness, it's a strength. And we want to get you that help so you can go back and worry about the mission at hand, not all the extra factors that are going on in everyone's lives, because everyone has them. And the other thing is, they're called emergencies because you don't expect it. And that's part of our name, is Army Emergency Relief. Are everything emergency nowadays? No. One example I'll give you is we have pet transportation assist now. And if you don't have a pet, then maybe that doesn't sound like an emergency to some people. But I can tell you, if you have a pet that's been in your family, they are part of your family. And you do not want to receive orders for anywhere in the States or anywhere overseas and be like, hey, you know what? This country charges $2,000 for me to ship my pet, and then they're going to be quarantined for 30 days. I can't afford it. Okay. I simply can't afford it. So I'm going to have to find, a family to take my dog or my cat or whatever it is. And we've kind of put our foot down on that and say, no, please come to us. We will help you. We'll give you a grant, or we'll give you a loan. And we want, things like that. We want your dog to remain in the family. So there's a lot of different categories, like I mentioned, that AR delves into to try to help the soldier in any way we can.
Fantastic. I have 2 cats that I think I clean up, throw up every single day. So if anybody wants them, you're welcome to them. But speaking of these other companies that so you drive off the base and you see all these billboards, understanding that they have higher interest rates, and if somebody were to default on a loan, how does that sort of work? If you're offering 0% interest on a loan or a grant, how are these paid back? And if the soldier ends up not being able to pay it back, what's the recourse?
Well, that's the tie-in with the fact that a lot of these companies know that paycheck is guaranteed. And you will eventually, have to pay for what you bought. I mean, it's either going to buy an allotment or something like that. Maybe you didn't start it, but you will do it because you're a military member. You're an Army soldier, and one of the things about being the Army is, you will be responsible for your actions. And so eventually you will pay for that in one form or another. Either, the company can do a legal allotment and get the money from you. And listen, there's a lot of great companies that have high interest loans that if you use it, it's not a bad thing if you pay it back on time. But the issue is when you don't pay it back on time. And the problem that we see is that we're trying to, again, we talked about keeping things internal, and there's a generation where they're not used to that. They're like, they're trying to pry into my business, and it really has nothing to do with that. We just don't want you to be worse financially off because you can go into a place and get, it's only $500 to carry me over for the next 2 weeks. But then when payday comes, you don't have that $500 to pay them back.
Yeah.
And that's where the problems, start to happen. And
Mhm.
that's when, maybe your chain of command is now taking a bigger approach to you. And one thing about the soldiers, we want to be known for what we do on the battlefield or in training. We don't want to be that person where, oh, Sean Ryan, yeah, that guy has a lot of financial problems, and I'm spending, all my time trying to fix his problems
Mhm.
versus worrying about the mission. And
Right.
so no one wants to be that person. So but again, there's a little bit of a stigma with some folks, and that's what we're trying to get over and demonstrate to them that there doesn't have to be. Like I said, asking for help. Don't let it get too far down the road before you ask for help. And then a lot of folks that maybe don't know about us, even in the Army, will be like, "I
Mhm.
wish I would have heard about you sooner." And we're like, "Yeah, we wish you would have too," because we don't want anyone to go through that. We want it to make as easy and simplest process as possible.
Say a soldier is deployed and knows that, oh boy, the wife and kids, they're back home and they're having some problems. Can a spouse, Blue Star spouse, can she come in and be like, hey, my kid broke his leg, we can't get the financial aid, like they're able to do this?
Sure. I mean, and I'll say that in the Army, we have something called the Family Readiness Groups, which is called the FRGs, and Krista may have brought that up during her time. There's groups that will look out for things like that and to make sure that your family is taken care of, and it's unit specific. But if you need something financially, yes, they can come into AR and seek assistance as well.
Mhm.
So, like I said, we're soldiers helping soldiers. We've been doing it for 80 years. I think we do an amazing job, and that's why we're here, is to help them.
How do donations work? Since it's a nonprofit, do you take donations from civilians, from servicemen? How does that all work out?
We do with service folks. We have, like I mentioned, we have a kickoff every year. That's not the only time you can give. You can give 24/7.
Is a
Uh,
kickoff like a gala? Is
it
a
is. It's
fund,
kind of
a
like,
donation
so.
drive?
It is. It's We try to have like a 3-month donation drive time
Okay.
frame,
Yeah.
to where we'll provide the arrows with, like, this year alone we had one installation had a hot wing contest. They others have had bowling competitions. Another one did an obstacle course.
Mhm.
We've had 5K color runs. So they've been very creative on how they get people together
Mhm.
to try to get folks to donate. And you can donate by allotment. You can donate online, which is, we're trying to streamline that process. Eventually by phone, Venmo. So we're trying to keep up with the times,
Yeah.
because of course old days is, hey, you fill out this allotment. And okay, nowadays, you know the younger generation does not want to do that they operate off their phone.
Right.
So if you can't do it on your phone, they're not going to do it. And we realize that, so we're trying to keep up. We do newsletters out to the retirees as well. And then we also have, it's small, but we have a department that will seek corporations, and a lot of times corporations will come to us. So we just received, matter of fact, one of the programs we have is financial literacy, and we had AUSA give us $1 million. And so how it works is this: every soldier that has a loan can go online and they can take a financial literacy test. And if they pass, they can get, for E4 and below, it's $200 off their loan. And for E5 and above, it's $100 off their loan automatically. All they have to do is just pass the financial literacy test. It's a multiple choice. And so we're doing things like that, to where we will work with corporations, and the specific donation will be earmarked for that program. Because we're trying to get people, you take the class and you learn. It's about a 45-minute, online class, and it'll kind of teach you a little bit more about finances, and then you'll take the quiz afterward, and then you can put that quiz credit towards your loan. So there's always things like that we're trying to think of and working with companies to do, to try to get everyone financial literate. Because look, if you look at our education today, the days when you'd go to PE and maybe you'd have your teacher telling you about how to write a check or things, that doesn't happen anymore in our
Yeah.
society. We did away with a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have, 18 to 25-year-olds coming into the Army. They've never written a check. They've never done a budget. They've never had anyone say, hey, this is how your credit report works. And this is how, having a higher score works to your benefit. You'll get a lower, loan rate and things like that. We just don't have that anymore. So
Yeah.
you can say what you want, but I think it's amazing that the Army has taken that on and saying, hey, we're going to make sure our soldiers are at least educated
Mm-hmm.
to a certain degree so they can live life and not, make mistakes every step of the way. So it's kind of like a parent, you don't,
Yeah.
your kids are going to make mistakes, but you're going to do everything you can for them to avoid those mistakes. And that's how I look at the Army as being as, even with me, hey, how can we help? And, what do you need to know about? And, they help you make these life decisions that
Yeah.
maybe you don't have anyone telling you how to do it. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great thing. It's generational as well. Sometimes you assume that people know this.
Yeah.
And I have two boys and they're grown now, but they make mistakes. So I'm like, how did you not know that? And then I'm thinking, how would they know that?
Right.
Because even though they went to college, they never had a class on
Mm-hmm.
how to buy a car.
Right.
What are the steps to buy a car? So in the Army, you'll have your sergeants and your NCOs, kind of teach you that, even if it's on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go to financial classes and it'll teach you, hey, this is how you buy a car, and this is why a lower rate is more important to you because you'll pay less money. And there's, like I said, there's if you go buy a car, there might be someone offering, hey, it's a 84-month loan.
Mm-hmm.
For some people that fits their budget, but they also have to understand you're paying interest for 84 months versus
Right.
maybe 60 months.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are the differences and what are the challenges and what works best for you? And like I said, I'm never gonna knock on any company, trying to sell something, because our soldiers today have things that that maybe would never have because maybe the period is a little bit longer and they can afford it. So it's not always a bad thing either. But I just want them to understand, the difference between a 60-month loan and maybe a 72-month loan or an 84-month loan or something like that. And I
Totally.
think that's where the Army helps. And
Yeah.
if you get into financial trouble, like I said, the Army has financial counselors. And then if you need help, that's what Army Emergency Relief was the whole reason we were built, is to do things like that.
And we've sort of landed on a lot of like the car themes, but for those listening, there's many different things that AER covers, and I have the
Sure.
list pulled up here, and I'm just going to go over some of them. So some of these might pop out to you if you're listening: emergency travel, natural disaster preparation and evacuation, mortgage, rent and initial deposit, temporary lodging, food, healthcare not covered by TRICARE. We mentioned vehicle costs, utilities, funeral expenses, basic essential furniture, which could probably be looped in with like PCS travel, permanent change of station.
Yep.
You mentioned cranial helmets. There's appliance costs, child care seats, dental care, home repair, non-medical attendant travel, invitational travel order, clothing, special needs medical equipment, spouse relicensing and recertification, childcare. There's a lot more than obviously just the car, but the car was a good way for us to sort of get into the conversation. There's many different avenues that if somebody needs this assistance, probably best to go to your chain of command, talk to ERC if they can help you.
I can tell you that probably the rent one is the biggest one, the first month. So you have to imagine that, like, we have Southern Command in Miami. If you haven't been to Miami lately, it's extremely expensive. So the Army may even give you, they do give you money when you PCS, when you leave one duty station and go to another. It's, probably a couple $1,000s, which back in the day, it covered most expenses. But if you go to Miami right now and you go get a 1-bedroom apartment, it's probably 3,500, and they want first month, last month, and maybe a deposit.
3,500
So
a month?
yeah, all of a sudden you're being asked for $9,000, and the Army does help, but the Army can only do so much as well. And so where are you going to get that help? And then you walk in and there's not a curtain to be found, and it's Miami. The sun's out every day. So it's little things like that that a lot of folks, if you've been in the same house for many years, that you kind of forget. But if you move like every 2 to 3 years, like we do, you walk into some places that are bare bones.
Yeah.
They don't have anything. So you're literally trying to, using bed sheets on your windows until you can get some curtains. You're
Hmm.
you're doing the best you can, but the more expensive places, the more difficult it is. So that's where AER helps as well. So that's probably actually the number one request right there.
Awesome. Sean, I want to, as we wrap up here, I want to see if there's any additional things that we may not have covered about AER.
I think we covered a lot, and like I said, there's different programs. I want to reiterate that every case is individual, and every case is a case by case basis.
Hmm.
So just because you may see a category on there, don't automatically assume that we can't help.
Right.
Because we will find a way. I mean, our motto also is unofficial, but it's find a way to say yes. And I
Hmm.
can tell you, like last year, we probably had a decline out of 25,000 requests, we probably declined 4 to 5.
Wow.
And maybe the person already had multiple requests in, because you can only do so much as well.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's something like that, or maybe they just didn't qualify. They
Right.
weren't, active duty, retiree, medically discharged, that type of thing. They just
Yeah.
didn't fall under the requirements. But we find a way to say yes, because Army Emergency Relief is here just to serve soldiers and to help them out and their families. So I definitely want anyone listening to know that, and also that we truly, truly um, appreciate the support of the American people
Hmm.
in all kinds of different ways. Don't think that your letters are not being read and your cards are not being read, and the well wishes, and when people say you're in our thoughts and prayers, I know that I felt it, and so I appreciate everyone out there that supports the military, not just the Army, all the military. And I understand also we need to bridge the gap
Yeah.
between civilians and military, because, like I said, I was military for almost 30 years, and now I'm a civilian.
Hmm.
And I mean, it happens that fast. And I'm
Yeah.
back in the population, and um, everyone has their life going on and everyone's busy. But we truly appreciate any time, thoughts, prayers, donations, whatever it may be that they bestowed on the military. And it didn't go unnoticed. I can tell you that.
Excellent. Well, Sean, thank you so much for your time today and for giving us all the information that you have about AER. I hope our listeners will check them out. We will have the link to the website in the description below. And if you are a first-time listener of the Scuttlebutt, thanks for listening. You can find all of our episodes across podcast platforms or on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you're the first to know when we release new episodes every Monday. And if you have any questions for AER, I'd be happy to pass you on to Sean or a representative of AER. You can email me at Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Sean, again, thank you so much for your time today. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Yep. Thank you, Sean. And like I said, I will answer all questions. If you have any, feel free to send them my way. Thank
Wonderful.
you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank both of our sponsors, the first being D&D Metal Recycling and Auto Salvage. They began as a small hauling and used auto parts operation in the Pittsburgh area in the late 1970s, but they've grown into a full-service metal recycling company with 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. D&D accepts all types of metal, both ferrous and non-ferrous, that may be generated by industrial manufacturing, construction and demolition, small commercial entities, as well as individual customers. They have a wide variety of material handling equipment and are capable of managing any type of job in a timely and efficient manner. You can contact them for quotes and availability at D&D. That's D&D Auto Salvage.com. Thank you so much to D&D. They've been a sponsor for quite some time, and we really appreciate their support. The second being Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and to getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health. So they want people to quit, and they have classes and nicotine replacement therapy and a popular quit line, which is the easiest number to remember ever, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. Finally, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all of what Tobacco-Free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org, or you can watch our recent episode with Tobacco-Free Adagio Health on the Scuttlebutt, where they talk about a lot of the programs that they offer for those who are looking to quit. Thank you to both of our sponsors for their continued support of the Scuttlebutt podcast. We really appreciate it. Thanks.